Welcome back into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I'm Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy, Rocky Magana. Rocky, the Kansas City Chiefs are once again the AFC West champions, sixth consecutive season, sixth consecutive record-breaking season for the Kansas City Chiefs atop the AFC West. They have clinched a playoff spot with their eighth consecutive win. Total domination from start to finish over the Pittsburgh Steelers. They win this thing 36-10. And I think there's a case, Rocky, that without Travis Kelce being shorthanded, dealing with the COVID outbreak all week long, and trying to navigate Christmas and all of that stuff, the Chiefs came into this game, and I think it was legitimately their most complete offensive performance of the season. Like, I don't think that that's crazy to say. It was in the first half, and they didn't even really have to try in the second half of this game all that much. It was really the first half. Everything was clean. Everything was sharp. Mahomes was just dealing, and Andy Reid was getting guys open. They knew exactly what they had to do to beat this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And from the very first snap, it was nothing but the Kansas City Chiefs. After the Los Angeles Chargers were upset by the Houston Texans today, the Chiefs were not leaving Arrowhead Stadium without the AFC West crown.
Yeah, I mean, the AFC West goes through Arrowhead year in, year out now. I think as long as Patrick Mahomes is the Chiefs quarterback and Andy Reid is the head coach, I think you can kind of expect this to kind of be the trend that continues. Andy Reid, I think, loves a challenge, and he was challenged this week more than any other week this season to be creative, and to really come up with a game plan that was going to be effective against a pretty stout Steelers defense. I know TJ Watt wasn't 100%, but he was still really effective out there. But Andy Reid's play calling, spreading the ball out off the bat, really kind of negated a lot of the things that the Steelers like to do. And I think you just see what sets him apart from other head coaches and why he's a Hall of Fame head coach.
Also, we talked about that this week on Show and BK. Like, this is an Andy Reid game, right? Like, if you feel like you know anything about the Kansas City Chiefs, you know anything about their Hall of Fame head coach, like, Andy Reid loves games like this. Like, Andy Reid enjoys coming into these games shorthanded sometimes, because that's when Andy's like, well, I can dial things up. I can get real creative with this. I can get Michael Burton touches. I can get Patrick Mahomes to hit 9 different receivers in the first half of a football game. And they needed this. Like, it's going to be hard to replace the production that you get not having Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. We talked about this a lot on AP this week. Like, this was the first time we were going to see Patrick Mahomes without Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce does not miss football games. And the only time he had ever done it was his first career start when they rested all of their offensive starters because Mahomes was a rookie. And this was basically what I expected. Like, we talked about it a lot headed into the game, that this was going to be an Andy Reid special and Patrick Mahomes was going to do what he does. And there's still been some question marks around the offense here and there over the last month or so. And I felt like we still hadn't really seen that, like, dominant game that we needed to see from this offense to say, like, okay, they're back. This defense is playing at a lights out level, and the offense can still go out and drop 40 points on you if they really need to. And now I'm back at that point. Like, and I needed this game. I needed this Travis Kelce-less game, I guess, to get there, because that, to me, this game said that Andy Reid is in playoff form. Like, Patrick Mahomes is in playoff form. The protection today was fantastic, and I understand TJ Watt was on a limited snap count, and he's not 100% playing with cracked ribs, which I'm sure is an absolutely brutal injury to try to play through. But the offensive line was fantastic, and we saw some of that Mahomes magic that I feel like we've been missing this season at different times.
No, 100% we saw some of that Mahomes magic. And I think one thing with this team is when games matter is when they really turn it on. And I think Andy knew that today mattered, and I think that played into a little bit of his really dialing in his play calling and maybe pulling a couple of things a couple of looks out of his bag that he hadn't done so far this year. But big time players have big time games. And I think Mitchell Schwartz on Twitter today had one of the best satire tweets I've seen in a while, saying that Travis Kelce's probably has been been holding back this offense, obviously, and you should probably just see what you can get for him on the trade market, because he's the thing that's holding this team back. Because you're right, it was the most complete offensive performance we've seen to date, and hats off to this offensive line. In the second half coming out when they just needed to move people and eat some clock and run the ball downhill after Clyde went out. I mean, they were just moving bodies off the line and just running the ball at will there in the second half.
Yeah, I think they needed this game in a lot of ways because we know how special Patrick Mahomes is. We know how special Tyreek is. We know how special Travis Kelce is. But this season, I think Mahomes has gotten into the bad habit at times of just looking at Kelce, just looking at Tyreek. And we've seen that with some of the offensive struggles where Mahomes was, okay, you got to get the ball out of your hands faster now. We don't have time for you to drift around in the pocket and take these super deep dropbacks. So we're going to kind of change the offense up a little bit based on how defenses are playing us. And then that kind of led to what I've been calling like the overcorrection of him staring down his wide receivers, which he had been doing with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill a lot lately. And today was the first time in a long time I felt like, okay, they told Mahomes, like, you can't stare them down. And maybe Tyreek Hill was, I know the Steelers were double teaming him a lot of the game. And there's something to be said for a player just not practicing all week, especially being on the COVID list and that kind of stuff. We don't know how that's going to affect them headed into this football game. So Tyreek Hill was active and you had the threat of Tyreek Hill, but I think there was an emphasis all throughout this week, like, okay, Pat, we need you to do what you do. Like, this is a game where we need you to go out and hit 9 different pass catchers in the first half of a football game. Because we've seen him do this in years past where he really, really spreads the football around. And I think having to make that midseason offensive adjustment kind of led to him staring down wide receivers a little bit, but it's all still there. He's still totally capable of doing it. And I think especially getting it out of the way this week, headed into a massive game next week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who went absolutely nuts today against the Baltimore Ravens. Like, Joe Burrow threw for 525 yards today. It went absolutely crazy. The Bengals are a fun, young, offensive team, and the Chiefs are going to have to put up some points next week. And this was the perfect tune-up game for that. This was the perfect game to say, well, we don't have Kelce. We just need Mahomes to go out and make plays, and we need guys to step up. And Byron Pringle certainly stepped up in this football game. So I'm really excited for that contest. I'm really excited that we finally got that game for this offense because I think they desperately needed it.
Well, yeah. And, you mentioned a little bit about Mahomes staring down his receivers. There's something to be said about being forced out of your comfort zone. And, maybe Kelce missing the game is actually the best thing that could have happened for Mahomes at this point, especially against this opponent. Where they're gonna double team Tyreek Hill out the back, and Kelce's not an option. So sorry, Mahomes, you got to look somewhere else. You got to find somebody else, and really just kind of like pushing them outside of that comfort bubble and saying, oh yeah, I do still have these other guys out here, and they can make plays if we put the ball on them. Obviously, hats off to the rest of the receiving core. Andy was running 3-4 wide receivers out there the entire game. And, aside from a couple of drops by Gordon, the rest of, Mecole and Byron Pringle specifically really stepped up in this game. I thought they had some really clutch plays and really, really, really dialed in and stepped up when the team was counting on them. So, I mean, hats off to the receiving team.
Yeah, we do have to mention that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he left. It was the first possession of the second half. He left with a shoulder injury, or what we thought was a shoulder injury, and then it was later called a collarbone injury. He did not return. There's some reason to worry there. We'll wait and see what the Chiefs say at their post-game press conferences, if there's any update there, or it may be something that we have to kind of wait till tomorrow once they can kind of dive deeper into what the injury could possibly be. But it looked like it was serious. Like when Clyde was walking to the locker room, his shoulder was kind of hanging, and it kind of makes you like a little worried that there might be a fracture or something going on there, which could mean that Clyde is going to miss the rest of the season, because that's not something you can come back from quickly, depending on the severity of it. But I don't want to speculate too much. But if the Chiefs do have to play an extended amount of time without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think that you saw enough, especially in this game from Darrell and Derek Gore, that you'd be okay with them just having to move forward with those running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially Darrell, Darrell's just a consistent guy. He's a limited athlete, but he's consistent. Whenever his number's called, he comes through. With Clyde, you don't want to speculate too much, but with a part of the body like the collarbone, there's a limited number of injuries that you can have. It's not like it's a joint. It's not a muscle. That's soft tissue. There's really only a couple of things that can happen to a collarbone, and none of them are good if you want to have a guy who can come back within the limited amount of time that's left in the season. I will say Jerick McKinnon should be coming off the IR soon if his hammy's right. He should be eligible pretty soon. So hopefully that's somebody that can jump back in the mix and give us that third back that we're going to need for a playoff push. But yeah, I mean, I feel really confident though with Gordon Williams. I don't think the offense misses a beat with those two guys, stepping in for Clyde.
Yeah, I think Darrell, especially as a pass catcher, and the way they're starting to utilize those running backs, like we're seeing it consistently now. Like that is a part of the offense now where it just simply wasn't early in the season. Mahomes is throwing to these running backs, and it's not just screens. Like they're utilizing Darrell Williams upfield regularly, and Darrell continues to make an impact like that. And then we saw the long pass play to Derek Gore as well. And that's something that the Chiefs offense hadn't done really since Kareem Hunt. I feel like maybe Damian Williams got some of that too when he was still here. But it feels like it's been a while since we've seen those running backs consistently have those like upfield routes where they can actually make plays. Like Derek Gore had a 50-yard reception in this football game. And that's just another wrinkle that they've added. And so obviously huge win, 36-10. It's hard to come out of that football game not feeling fantastic about what the Kansas City Chiefs did. But the optimism that I'm feeling right now is like, you look around the rest of the NFL, and like I know the Titans won on Thursday, the Bills won today, Chargers got upset, but then you have your question marks about some of these other teams, like especially in the AFC, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are dealing with a ton of injuries right now. We're not really sure when Leonard Fournette and Mike Evans are going to be back. They lost Chris Godwin for the season. And then Shaquille Barrett actually left today's game with an injury, and I haven't seen an update on that yet. But the Bucs are really injured. The Packers are playing really, really well right now, and I think it is down to the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs as being the top two teams in the NFL, and I don't know if anybody else is even that close right now.
No, I mean, it's not even close. There's not another team in the AFC that doesn't have huge question marks next to their name. I mean, Indianapolis looks tough at times, but as long as Carson Wentz is your quarterback, do you really feel confident in him, playing consistently throughout a playoff run and putting back-to-back big games up? You don't. And Tennessee, as long as King Henry is out, they're vulnerable. And there's talk that he'll be back for a playoff run, but even then you wonder if they're rushing him back and if he's going to look the same when he comes back. The Chiefs are the most complete team in the AFC right now. Now, the Packers, they look good. They could give the Chiefs a run for their money in the Super Bowl. But I mean, yeah, it's just there's not another team on this half of the league that really strikes fear in you right now. I mean, it's just is what it is. The Chiefs are the ones that everybody should be scared of.
And I want to talk about the defense here in a minute because they were fantastic again today. But Rocky, remember where we were at early in the season when this team was 3-4, and I was hard on them, especially out of anybody on this post-game show. I was hard on them because I just simply believe like this team is so much better than the way that they were playing early in the year. And I believed it, and I believed in it so deeply that I was like, they just simply can't be this bad. And so I was really frustrated with how they were playing early on in the season. And they've answered that, and all they've done is rattle off 8 wins in a row, and they are playing as good as any team in the NFL right now, offensively and defensively. And I do want to mention that Tyrann Mathieu did also leave this game with a quad injury. We'll give you an update on that as soon as we have it. My hope is that it was just we don't need you in the second half of this football game. Just hit the showers, rest up, get an ice pack, whatever you need to do. Just make sure you're good to go for next week, because we are going to need you next week, but we don't need you in this game. So we can go ahead and sit you for the rest of the football game. So we'll get an update on that here in a little bit, hopefully, but hopefully it's not a super serious injury for Tyrann Mathieu. But I don't know how you could come out of this football game, and I understand it's the Steelers, and Ben is decrepit and just a barely functioning like corpse of a quarterback right now. But you have to feel good about that, because the Pittsburgh Steelers are vying for a playoff spot, and you just totally dominated them. Like, you were just in a totally different class than that football team today.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even close. And yeah, old man Winter was doing old man Ben no favors, creeping into his bones and making him pretty rickety out there today. But I mean, hats off to L'Jarius Sneed coming back from a hard family situation. He shut down the entire half side of his field, with the exception of that one, PI call that he had. But I mean, I don't think L'Jarius Sneed gave up a yard after the catch all day long. They kept on trying to throw those wide receiver screens out to his side, and he shut them down every single time. And he was sniffing those things out, left and right. And I mean, he was the best player in the secondary today, I think, hands down.
Yeah, and to key back in on the defense, like, they were dominant from the first series of the game. We knew coming into this that Pittsburgh's offensive line has been bad all season. And it doesn't help that Ben just simply can't move. Like, he just cannot move anymore. And I think Steelers fans are kind of ready for Ben to call it quits. But this was the performance you needed from the defense, and you didn't have Nick Bolton, and, coming off of another game where your defense stepped up and you were shorthanded without Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed. Like, it was just a totally dominant performance from them. And we were talking about it before the podcast started. The Steelers offense doesn't adjust because they can't. They understand what the limitations of Ben Roethlisberger are at this point in his career. So everything is designed around the line of scrimmage, because they know, like, we don't really feel comfortable with Ben dropping back too much, because he can't drop back very fast and he doesn't move very well now. He also just doesn't have anything left in his arm, so he can't get a lot of pop on the football when he releases it. And so everything is around the line of scrimmage. And they've been a bad offensive team all this season, but the Chiefs are a particularly bad matchup when you cannot adjust for your line of scrimmage passing game because of L'Jarius Sneed, because of Tyrann Mathieu, because of Juan Thornhill. Like, their corners and their secondary members are all good tacklers for the most part. And Dan even gets in the mix and has been kind of freed up to be more of like that kind of roaming linebacker almost, in the way that Spags has been utilizing him lately. Like, the Chiefs are a tough team to try to play that way, and the Steelers simply can't adjust their offensive game plan, and it led to just total domination by the Chiefs up front.
Yeah, I mean, what the Steelers want to do plays 100% into what Spags wants to do. He wants to play his defensive backs up on the line of scrimmage and get hands on you, and then send heat, in a variety of different ways in the blitz. And as far as Big Ben goes, I tweeted out at the time that Big Ben didn't throw that interception off the flea flicker. Mike Tomlin did, because he never should have called that play. Your quarterback can't make that throw anymore, and you had no business dialing up that play with the wind in Arrowhead today like it was. But yeah, I mean, the front four won, across the board multiple times. Jaron Reid had himself a game today. Frank Clark, was getting pressure off the edge. I mean, this was just a top to bottom defensive domination by a very good defense against a very, very limited offense. And the Steelers were outclassed from the jump today.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs entered this game without Travis Kelce, without Nick Bolton, and Nick Bolton was coming off his best game as a professional, where like it felt like in that game against the Chargers, he almost like made a star turn. And then Rashad Fenton, who has been absolutely fantastic for them all season long. And they didn't have Harrison Butker or Tommy Townsend. Like, there's something to be said for going into a football game that you needed to have to make sure you stay atop the AFC without your kicker and without your punter and without your Hall of Fame tight end and your star rookie linebacker, and then totally dominating that way. Like, it speaks to the Chiefs coaching. It speaks to the Chiefs depth. Like, they are in a really, really good position right now to go on another run. And I'm at the point in the season where, again, I'm looking around at every other team across the league, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. Like, Rodgers is playing about as good as anybody in the sport right now, and the Packers are playing really, really well. But I think when I look across the entire NFL, that's the only team I'm scared of at the moment. It is the Green Bay Packers, because the Chiefs are playing so well defensively. And the offense just did that today without Travis Kelce. Like, I understand playoff matchups are tough, but then you look at the AFC and you're like, okay, well, who's going to beat the Chiefs in the AFC? Nobody that I can think of off the top of my head. I know they've lost to the Titans. I know they've lost to the Bills, but like, those teams aren't playing better than the Kansas City Chiefs are playing right now.
No, the Chiefs are playing their best football when these other teams are playing some of their worst football. And I mean, just imagine if with today's defensive performance, if Nick Bolton was on the field, I mean, they might not have gained a single yard the entire game. It should be scary to the rest of the league that this is what the Chiefs looked like when they were missing numerous key positions. And I think Mahomes, before this game, he said, no Tommy Townsend. All right, we just won't punt today then. I'll just make sure that I move the ball up and down the field all day, and then we don't need a punter, So, but hats off to Elliott Fry for being the greatest Elliott kicker in the history of the Chiefs organization, and, coming through, when we really needed him in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, I don't blame those misses on him. Like, if you're in Kansas City, it is windy today. It is very windy outside. And we saw that affecting this game a little bit early on. Affecting Ben Roethlisberger, not really Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes was still out there just throwing lacers all over the football field. But like, Ben's velocity on his throws has deteriorated so much that, like, in perfect weather conditions, he's throwing ducks a lot of the time. And so today, he had some passes where it looked like the wind was just going to knock those things to the ground, because Ben just has no velocity on his throws anymore. It is just ugly. And so, the weather played a little bit into that, but there was no way the Steelers were going to put up a lot of points in this game. The Chiefs defense just knew exactly what they were going to do and knew exactly how to stop them. And then that Turk Wharton sack fumble, like, it was just an exclamation point on the entire performance from this entire football game. And again, Ben, because he can't move, we're talking about Ben Roethlisberger here, he just simply can't move really anymore. Like, he just walked right into the sack, and just Turk Wharton just batted the football out of his hand.
You mean the Ben Roethlisberger's handoff to Turk Wharton?
Yeah.
that ended up with Jaron Reid scooping it up. Yeah. It almost has reached the point with Big Ben where it's just kind of sad to watch. Like, his passes have the velocity of a monarch butterfly, trying to make their way downfield, just kind of fluttering gracefully in the wind.
Yeah. They look like balloons, just like dancing in the wind.
I mean, it's like you could put some like really like classical music over his passes, and it'd probably be a really beautiful thing to watch, like the ending of American Beauty with that plastic bag just whipping all around the wind. That's just put one of Ben Roethlisberger's passes up there, and it's the exact same thing at this point. He's been a great quarterback, but you got to know when to hang up your cleats, Ben. And that time was about, last year, week 10 of last year. And so, oh well, but we're here to talk about the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are the best team in football right now, and I cannot be prouder of the adversity that this team has gone through. I mean, you want to talk about, there's not a single team in football that's been through more adversity than this team heading in, into the home stretch of this season.
Yeah, well, and that's what makes them scary too, is because while they faced so much adversity early in the season and struggles and just could not seem to put it all together, this team has done all of this before. Like, this team is the most experienced roster in the NFL right now when it comes to making late season playoff runs and going to Super Bowls, because they've done it in back-to-back seasons. They've been to 3 straight AFC championship games. That experience matters in the NFL postseason. And I mean, that's why we saw Tom Brady. I know a lot of the circumstances aligned for Tom Brady over his career with New England, but that playoff experience matters. And that's why the Chiefs are a scary football team right now, because of everything that they've gone through. And this was the first game, I feel like, again, where I was like, okay, they're back. Like it's all back. It's all still there. Everything that I thought was there before the season, prior to the 3-4 start, yeah, all that stuff's still there. So they might actually be a little bit better, like, because the defense might actually be better than I thought it was going to be, with the way Nick Bolton and Willie Gay have really improved and stepped up, the way Juan Thornhill has stepped in and had a huge impact. And we've seen L'Jarius Sneed develop into what looks like a legitimate star caliber cornerback. And then you talk about Tyrann Mathieu and Chris Jones' dominance and Jaron Reid stepping up, Melvin Ingram having a huge role on the defense, and Frank Clark finally looking like himself again. Like, Frank got another sack today. Like, this defense is better than I thought it was at this point. And I don't see how you could argue with it.
No, I mean, if this defense is healthy, you look up and down, the roster, there's not a single hole on this defense. There's not a single player on the Chiefs starting 11 where you feel uncomfortable about them lining up against anybody in the NFL. You name the best matchups in the NFL, and I have Melvin Ingram and Frank Clark. I got confidence that they can beat the best offensive line, the best set of tackles in the NFL. I got confidence that Jaron Reid and Chris Jones can beat the best center guard combos. I got confidence in all three of our linebackers. I don't think that any wide receiver is going to come in and dominate Ward, Fenton, or Sneed, any of them. And then you got Mathieu and Thornhill on the back end. I mean, this is the type of team that other teams have to worry about playing against. This is a defense where it's an elite unit at this point, where they are a factor in a game, and other teams have to try to scheme around our defense to try to make something happen, because you're not just going to come in and play us straight up and beat us at this point.
To one of our commenters, David, who says, I remember you guys complaining about how bad these guys were. Have I not been admitting that all show, Rocky? Have I not been admitting that all show? That, yes, I was hard on them early in the season, but it was because, as unfairly as our expectations were really high early in the season, like they should have been. And we're seeing that now because, again, here we are. Through 16 weeks of the NFL season, the Chiefs, now winners of 8 in a row, sit at 11-4 atop the AFC, and they look like the best team in football. That was the expectation. And so it was perfectly fine to question that at 3-4 early in the season, and they've answered everything that we needed answered at this point.
Yeah, in our defense, I'll be the first to say I was very, very hard on them, very hard on Sorensen. I said he didn't belong on the field ever again. I mean, keep the receipts, but they were playing very bad football at that point in time. They're playing very good football now. I'm glad that I was super wrong about this defense. Nobody's happier about being wrong about this defense than I am. But at the same time, Melvin Ingram helped unlock this front four because they pushed Chris Jones back inside. Nick Bolton was not getting meaningful snaps in the beginning. Willie Gay was injured, and then Thornhill was on the bench, and Sorensen was getting off his snaps. So it's not like there hasn't been a bit of a defensive overhaul since the time when we were doom and gloom. Spagnuolo looked in the mirror and saw that the changes needed to be made, and he made them, and it's turned out to work very, very well for him and this Chiefs team moving forward. But yes, we were wrong. This team is the best in the AFC right now. Were they at that time? I don't think so, but they are now.
And I also remember some fans calling for Spags to be fired after the first 6 weeks of the season. Like, yes, I understand. We were definitely hard on this team. Spags deserves all the credit in the world for admitting, like, okay, I like leaning on the veteran guys, but the veteran guys are making me look really bad early in the season. And he put his trust in the rookie players. And then, yeah, Melvin Ingram and Frank Clark getting healthy were huge boosts for the defense. But Spags putting his trust in these young players, in Juan Thornhill, in Nick Bolton, in Willie Gay, in L'Jarius Sneed, in Rashad Fenton, all of those guys have become huge key contributors to this defense and the turnaround that they have had over the second half of the season. And that was probably hard for Spags because he generally doesn't do that. Like we've seen that with him throughout his entire career. He doesn't like leaning on young players like this because he runs a complicated defense and they like to change things up and they like to throw blitzes and different looks at you and stuff. And so that's why he doesn't do that usually. But he admitted his faults. He did it, and it totally transformed the defense to the point where you're like, okay, like the defense might be better than the offense. Like the defense might be the best part of this football team now. And so it took some growing. And that's why, again, I am so happy that we got this type of performance today because it's been a long time coming, Rocky, especially for us. We've done a lot of these post-game shows, man. And this performance has been a long time coming. And I'm absolutely thrilled for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, 100%. And I'll tell you, the person who should be happiest about a lot of this is Dan Sorensen. I think Juan Thornhill taking his starting job might have been the best thing that ever happened to him because now Spags gets to use him how he really wants to use him as situationally near the line of scrimmage, like you saw last week when he broke up that fourth down pass. Like that's where Dan Sorensen really succeeds. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of these. And listen, I couldn't be happier. This is the Chiefs team that we've been waiting to see, that we were waiting to see, and it's going to be a fun ride the rest of the way.
Yes. Make sure you're locked into the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network all throughout the week. Of course, we will have plenty of coverage for you as the Chiefs turn their attention towards the Cincinnati Bengals in what is going to be a huge matchup next week against a team that can put up some offensive points of their own. So it's going to be a tough test for that Chiefs defense next week. Please make sure that you're following Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. We do ask that you please subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. If you're listening on the podcast and you'd like to listen to the Chiefs post-game press conferences, make sure you stick around immediately after the show. Have Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, I'm assuming Byron Pringle, and anybody else the Chiefs throw up there. We'll have all of that immediately after this podcast. And make sure Monday afternoon, Out of Structure, Ron Kopp, Matt Stagner, they will break down the entire Chiefs performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers for you. Answer some of your Twitter questions to the Chiefs mailbag. That's coming up on Monday afternoon on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Chiefs again atop the AFC West, 6th consecutive season. They are AFC West champions atop the AFC with an 11-4 record. Headed to Cincinnati next week. We'll see how it goes. We're excited. We're pumped for it. And the Chiefs are playing their best football at the best time of the year. Rocky, Merry Christmas. Hope you guys enjoyed your Christmas. Let's get into the new year with another Chiefs win. We'll talk to you guys soon.